Two, one. Welcome to the Lightforge. This is ADWCTA.
This is Merps, and I have to say, I don't think I've ever been as excited for a Lightforge as I am today. This is going to be good.
So why don't we start off by talking about what happened in the last 2 days? Because I think a lot of things happened, or maybe nothing happened. I don't really know. Why don't we do a recap?
No big deal. This small event called BlizzCon happened. Some guy won some world championship in Hearthstone. And, they unveiled this small little expansion that's coming out on freaking Thursday. Oh my gosh.
You mean
Thursday.
like the first Thursday of December, which is when they release things?
Oh yeah, yeah, that's exactly what I mean. It must have been a typo that they're releasing it in 4 days. Oh man, I can't even wrap my head around that. Woo.
So to everybody, there was this nice Reddit post that was upvoted all the way to the top that went something like, "I wish every time Blizzard said soon, they meant next Thursday." From here at Hearth Arena and the algorithm developers of Hearth Arena, no. I hope that's not what they mean. They've basically just like killed our lives for the next 4 days. So well played, Blizzard. But no, we're very excited about this expansion, and let's be honest, TGT had its run, probably more so in constructed than in arena. But we liked what TGT did, but we're very much ready for the next meta to kind of take shape. And what are your I guess so. The expansion revealed is called the League of Explorers, and is going to be 45 cards released, which is about 15% more. Not 15%, 50. No, I can't do math. No,
I'm not gonna
50.
help you out
It's
here.
50% more than Nax. And the thing that the way that they're being released is that it's going to be very much focused on class cards. There are two class commons and one class rare. And if you think about that, that's like about the same as what a real expansion gets. Like that's what TGT, that's what GVG did. So as far as classes go, there's going to be some decently sized shakeups. So it's an adventure expansion, but it's really a in the middle kind of expansion when it comes to how much it'll affect the arena, just because of the heavy tilt towards common class cards.
Yeah, I tend to see this as sort of a BRM kind of change. It won't be like the massive meta shifting meteor that GVG was, right?
Oh yeah.
So I see it as more like BRM, where you throw in a couple of good cards. Overall, not super impressive. And I definitely think there are some good cards, and we'll go through them later on. I'm very excited to be talking about new cards. But yeah, we're getting into an adventure, and you could see that Blizzard isn't trying to do anything revolutionary here. It is the truest sense of an expansion. It's just
Monkeys everywhere. Golden monkeys, drooled monkeys, fierce monkeys. How is that not new? We didn't have any monkeys before this.
we had Mukla and Mukla's champion. You're forgetting
Those
about
are apes. Those are not monkeys.
that. Ooh, that's my bad. Sorry, man. Ugh.
Key
But
distinction there.
But yeah, I think as for overall impact, we're looking more at a BRM type of impact on the arena. But as for the individual cards, man, I wouldn't say I'm underwhelmed. I think it's just what an expansion should be. There are a few gems here and there, and overall though, it seems to be kind of minion heavy, and overall the cards are nothing stands out as of right now.
I'm gonna read between the lines of what you just said and actually say it instead of pussyfooting around it. The cards in this expansion suck. They do. This is not like rocket science here. You just have to look at it and then you have to think about, how about we compare them to the best cards that we currently get? And you'll find like 90% of these cards are going to fall short. But in the arena, this is totally okay, right? Arena
Yes,
does not
definitely.
have the problem that Constructed has, where every single expansion has to have top tier cards, or else you're not going to see them played. They're just never going to see the light of day. In the arena, any card that's like average will see plenty of play, and any card that's even bad will still see some play.
Yeah.
And if there's a theme in this expansion, I think the theme is okay-ish cards in the arena. that will never see the light of day in constructed. And there's plenty of cards that I would say are playable in the expansion, but I would be blown away if you ever saw these in the rank scene, like Jeweled Scarab, right?
Right. Exactly.
Just a basic card. It's 2 mana. It's a 1/1. Battle Cry is discover a 3 cost card, which means you're basically get to pick between 3 random 3 cost cards that your class has access to. It's like a novice engineer with some flavor to it, but that's not going to see play in constructed. On the other hand, in the arena, novice engineer is ranked like a 50, a 52, so this is going to be somewhere around there, and so it will see play.
On go. So yeah, I think this whole expansion is definitely more arena focused, as in it's just a nicer way of saying that the cards suck once again, right?
Yeah, I mean, okay, fine, but if you are like in the arena, it doesn't matter, right? If the cards suck, because you still play with it, it still affects the meta. And I do think it's kind of underrated right now how much these cards are going to affect the meta, not because they're terribly special, but just because the quantity is higher than I think people are. Like, people have this mindset of, oh, it's an adventure, you're going to have this much impact, but it's 2 commons that are rare. That's almost double the impact of BRM by the numbers, plus a little dilution from TGT. It's still going to have a bigger impact.
Yeah, and something I always wondered is whether or not they're going to keep consistent the 25% increased offering rate, which I think they should. That's kind of what they do with every expansion, right?
So they actually announced it. This is like the last clip, like right before the panel on Heroes of the Storms happened. Apparently what's going to happen is the 25% thing for TGT is going to stay around until the very last wing is released, and then it'll switch over to the LOE plus 25%. So the true impact of LOE really won't happen until the end of the last wing. And it's also only 4 wings this time. So it's going to be a compressed schedule. We normally get 5 wings.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited about that. Well, some people are excited because it'll be cheaper, right? 4 wings, you don't have to pay for all 5 wings, and you still get a good amount of cards. So that's value right there.
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, it's a good expansion. If you're an arena player, you should be very happy with the expansion, or you should at least be normally happy with the expansion and just kind of happy that it's coming so soon. Mm-hmm. I can see that if you're a constructed player, well, you might just like roll your eyes and go like, all right, this will keep me entertained for a little bit, but then I'm going to beat the adventure and never look at any of these cards again.
Yep.
So one thing I do want to talk about is how this whole meta is going to change based on that, right? You talked about the 25%. TGT slowed the game down. We kept talking about it. It would slow the game down by like 1, maybe even 2 turns. And that 25% bonus is going to get erased.
Yep. I definitely think that this will slow the game down even further. If you look at things that accelerate
even though the 25% from TGT is getting erased.
Yeah, just because if you look at the cards that are coming out here, just broadly speaking, we have a lot of cards that are higher mana cost, and especially a lot of the good cards are just either mid to late game oriented. And I think most importantly, we don't have many dominant spells. There are a couple of good spells. I think Entomb is pretty decent. I think the Torch is pretty good as well, and you have discover mechanics which help you discover spells, but this is not a very spell heavy expansion, in which case spells equal initiative, make the game a little bit faster. So I think this will definitely contribute to a slower game as well, and just kind of the overall weakness and the overall situationalness of some of these minions will also help the meta slow down.
Yeah, exactly. Weak minions do less stuff, so the game goes on for longer. That's something people I don't think like focus on, but it's true. And also, what is discover mechanic but another way to draw a card, right? Which slows the game down. So that's pretty key as well. As I agree, you look at it, it's 45 cards. What's TGT? Like 130 cards?
Something
I don't know. Something like that. So yeah, you're losing the 25% bonus, but then you get these 45 new slow cards that also have a 25% bonus, and it'll more than make up for it. So I do think the meta's going to, get a little bit slower even, despite the lack of the TGT bonus. Okay, so this question actually came from the chat, and I thought this was pretty interesting, which is just that, which card are you the most excited for?
Ooh, okay.
I know you're not excited for any card because this is LOE and all the cards suck, but if you had to be excited for one card, arena wise, which one would it be?
Can I pick two?
I mean, I'm not going to stop you.
All right, good. You can't stop me from this one. I'm actually excited about almost all of the road cards, but I'm really excited about the Pit Viper. I hope that's correct. It's either Pit Snake or Pit Viper, and
It's a
the
pit snake.
Pit Snake, and also the 3 mana Raptor that copies
Unearthed
Death Rattle.
Raptor.
Yep, I'm
You don't
excited
even
about.
know the names of things you're excited about. That's
I,
how
I
excited you are about them.
I'm just so excited. Period. But yeah, I think the 2/1 that has the Emperor Cobra effect, the poison
Hmm.
effect, I think that is just really good tempo wise. With a lot of one drops, already especially good in Rogue because of the tempo nature of the class. And now, if you're a ping class, you're forced to ping. Like if there was any one way to force a ping, that would be it. And if you're a non-ping class, well, you could be in trouble because rogues get on the board very quickly. And if they have things to protect that really annoying 2/1, um, that could just be game at that point. And also the Raptor, at worst, it's a spider tank, which is pretty good. And a lot of times you can curve into something like Hunt a Creeper, or you can save it from later, in which you could copy a Sludge Belcher
So the
or.
Unearthed Raptor has the effect that says Battle Cry. Choose a friendly minion. Gain a copy of its Death Rattle effect. It's
Mhm.
otherwise a 3 mana 3/4.
Yep. So good vanilla stats, which are always key in the arena. And with a powerful class like Rogue, I think, which has a lot of options already and a lot of flexibility, giving low cost cards with powerful effects will only make the Rogue better.
Okay, I can see that. With the rogue, a lot of times you're doing for this swing turn on turns like 4 or like 3 even, or turn 5, where you like throw out a bunch of spells, combos, coin, all that good stuff, and you take control of the board. So taking control of the board, you're usually dropping something very small. So if you're dropping that with a pit snake, for example, even if you're doing it a turn later, your opponent's response can no longer be drop my 5 drop, right, and hope it doesn't get sapped. It's now going to be, crap, I better have two things to play, or I better be able to like remove something, or else you're pretty screwed. And also, 1 mana card triggers combos.
Yeah.
That can't be overstated. So I don't think I'm excited by those cards just because Rogue is so good already. Like the dilution effect, I think will counter a lot more of the goodness of these cards than you might think. And like, is it really better than a Buccaneer? Like, I don't think it's better than a Buccaneer. It's just it still only hits one thing, you know? Like Buccaneer, you kind of want to remove it off the board too. And if you think about it in that kind of terms, I don't think it's changing the Rogue's game really.
Yeah, it
Uh,
doesn't change the rogues game, but it's while some classes I think their cards got diluted with some questionable cards here and there. I think the rogues just got solid, good minions that fit into their game plan, so they can continue to play the game plan that they want, which not every class got, right?
I totally agree. So the card I'm most excited about is Explorer's Hat. This is such an amazing card when it comes to how fun it is to play with it. Not necessarily that it's the most powerful card. And so Explorer's Hat is a hunter card. It is a rare. It's 2 mana, and it reads: give a minion +1/+1 and Death Rattle. Add a Explorer's Hat to your hand. So it's basically like an equipment that never dies, and it keeps returning back into your hand. And 2 mana for +1/+1 is about like hero power level, right? Like you can make it 1/1 on the board with the Paladin's hero power. This gives one of your minions +1/+1. It has the bonus where if you kill off that minion on that turn, you can get it back and play it again. It has the downside that if you don't kill your minion on the next turn even, then you don't get it back to play the next turn. But otherwise, you're spending a card, which is not that great for a hero power, but it changes the way Hunter can play the game. So this is the right way, I think, to create this whole new dimension to a class, rather than something like Shadow Form, right? Which changes your hero power, but you have to anti-tempo yourself so hard to play it. This gets the effect with 2 mana already. So it's like just having the hero power already as an alternate hero power.
Yeah, I think it's definitely very interesting in a design perspective where you're almost giving the hunter this new hero power, right? But you're not taking away its old hero power.
Yep.
And in the arena, where it is very board centric. It does give the hunter a way to interact with the board a little bit more. And the question is it worth a card? That's a question I don't think we're prepared to answer right now. But I definitely think
infinite cards.
Exactly. Why have one card when you can just have 30, 40, as many cards as you want?
As many hats as you want, man.
So many.
As many hats as there are turns in the game.
But I definitely think it is interesting from a design perspective, and I want to see how it turns out.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to still talking about LOE. Still hyped about LOE. There's this thing called a Discover mechanic. It's the new mechanic, and before we even get into what the Discover mechanic is, I just want to point out, and I don't know how many people are talking about this, but it's not on a lot of these cards.
Yeah.
It's like in one of the common neutral cards, and then it's in like a couple of class cards. Like, there's not a lot of discovery going on really in this expansion. Despite it being the new mechanic, it actually has its own word. Like, it's even above Joust, right? Because Joust doesn't have its own keyword. Joust, that actually describe exactly what the heck is happening with battle cries. But Discover is a keyword. And I haven't counted up how many times it happens, but it's really few.
Yeah. It's something that they obviously want to introduce. And I think for every expansion, they sort of want a flavor, a theme, and if they can add something, but it doesn't have to dominate the entire expansion. It has something new that people can talk about, and it sets the foundation for later expansions to build upon, right? And we've seen this this mechanic. So Discover, you basically get to pick 3 cards out of the neutral class or your class.
No, you don't get to pick the 3 cards. You get 3 random cards shown to you from neutrals or your class.
Yeah, and you get to pick out of that.
So like the way tracking works.
Yeah, it's basically just expanding on tracking. We've seen it in the game before, and it's just expanding the tracking mechanism. And I think this is really cool. I think it's a fun way to implement variety to kind of spice up the game. And I think one thing that people like to talk about is good RNG versus bad RNG, right? A lot of people say that cards such as like Ram Wrangler is bad RNG, where you play it and it's just it's so variable. You can either get a young Dragonhawk or you could get a King Crush. Some people also think that Joust is bad RNG, where it's you either hit it like with the Master Jouster or you just die because you don't.
I challenge anybody who thinks Joust is good RNG.
And then there's such things as good RNG, in which you can either control, like it might be an RNG battle cry, but you can control when you play it, sort of like a Mad Bomber effect. And I think Discover, if you were to sort of put it in one of these boxes, I think it would be in the good RNG, in which the effect, like the pool of cards, is limited. You also get to control it in a way because options are given to you. And it also gives players a way to further showcase their skill. When do you play the Discover card? And then after that, what card do you pick, right?
And then after that, when do you play that card that you pick?
Exactly.
So many decisions. It's just, I agree. I think it's a very good mechanic. And in terms of being able to combine both skill and RNG. And those are the mechanics that you kind of want in this game. Because we know Blizzard's going to make RNG in this game. That's what this game runs on. And so they need to be the good kind of RNG. If they are the bad kind of RNG, then we're gonna have some. The game's just going to devolve into an RNG fest, and so this is a great direction for Blizzard to be taking the game in. One thing that I want to add to this is that it looks like it's tracking, right? The thing that we're familiar with is tracking, and when we see this kind of option, but it's not tracking. It's not as good as tracking. So we're going to talk a little bit more about our tier list changes in a little bit when it comes to just updating the Hearthstone Arena tier list for the current meta even. Because when we updated the tier list, we didn't actually know this expansion was coming like right around the corner. So it was adjusted with just the current meta in mind. And we raised tracking by 8 points from like I don't know what it was at originally, like a 54 or something, to like a 62 or a 64. I don't have the exact stats in front of me.
Yeah.
Part of it is because the stats definitely say that, and part of the reason why the stats say that this card, which is kind of used as a combo-y cycling kind of card, which is useful for combos, as well as a anti-tempo card, because you are spending 1 mana to do basically nothing. The reason it is so powerful is because of card quality. You have a double filter when you play a tracking. It is very much different. People focus on the fact that you get to pick the cards you need, but what I want to focus on is the fact that whatever cards you're picking is going to be significantly better than a random card in your deck, not just for your purposes, but in general. Arena gives you 3 cards, you select the best one. Arena gives you 3 cards, you select the best one. Now your whole entire deck is filled with the best card out of 3. When you track, you once again select the best card out of 3. So you've double layered it, which means the card you tracked is 9 times better than a random card being given to you if you are only picking on value. And of course, you have the choice of which one you pick. So best, being used in a very loose term, means that the cards you pick is essentially the best out of 9 cards.
Yeah.
That of 9 random cards. That makes tracking have an incredible edge on just card quality. And the 2 cards you throw away are going to be the worst cards too, and they're no longer in your deck and you can't draw them anymore. So that's where tracking gets a ton of value as compared to, let's say, a 1 mana card that says draw your next card. The selecting the card portion is the more obvious part of the value, but I think just as big when it comes to such a value focused game like the Arena is the fact that you are just getting better cards. And like 9 out of 9 cards you get the best card. That is huge.
Yeah. And obviously, it's not exactly like that, right? You're not presented with 9 cards and told to pick the best one exactly. It's a double filter, so the math is a little bit different. But the point is there. So with tracking, you could see why it is a good card, and you have to spend this 1 mana. But you spend this 1 mana to create this double filter to get this exact card that you want. And for hunters, especially with the game style that they play, they need kind of that advantage, right? Because they don't have a ping. So you could see where tracking fits in there, definitely.
Yeah. So, and we bring that up as a difference with Discover, because Discover is not like that. You don't get to pick the first initial 3 random cards and then pick another 3 cards of that. So you are really just getting the best of 3 random cards as opposed to the best of 9 random cards. So that's a very significant drop in value, the difference between Discover and tracking.
Right. And it is different when you look at different minions, right? Like the mage card that basically lets you discover a spell. That card will definitely kind of shift your calculations because mage spells are pretty good. So if you're able to pick up a Frostbolt, Fireball, Polymorph, Flame Lance, those are really good cards. I forgot the name before. I just checked it. It's Ethereal Conjurer, a 5 mana 6/3 that helps you discover a spell. So out of 3 potential choices for mage spells, you're probably going to get a pretty good one, even though it's not double filtered.
Yeah, I totally agree. So going on with this Discover, I mean, we focused a lot on it because it's the new mechanic. Like I said, you're not going to actually see it a lot. This will just give you a frame of mind of what to do if you when you meet up with it. Let's move on to more about the expansion. Classes. Who are the biggest winners and who are the biggest losers in LOE, and how will this affect class rankings? What do you think?
Oh man, that's pretty tough. First of all, I don't think it will have a huge impact, mostly because I don't see any class gaining, something extraordinary. I don't think there's kind of an imp gang boss in here, like there was in BRM. But I think winners are definitely Rogue and to some extent maybe Paladin. I really like that new Keeper of Uldaman card. But with Rogue, I already explained a little bit. I think they just got early game solid minions that fit into their game plan. And with Rogues already, they have a very powerful set early game strategy. And if an expansion adds to that, I think that's really good. I think the real issue, or really the class that kind of takes away, um, is the priest. I think the priest kind of lost here, which is really unfortunate because the priest is not in a good spot at all. But unfortunately for the priest, because they kind of got heavier cards and they have one more mass removal, and they got one more big removal in Entomb, and it doesn't address any of the weaknesses, which is getting on the board early and having more early game options. The priest doesn't need more removals, more heavy stuff. It needed something like a shielded mini. It needed a muster, something that elevated paladins. But alas, it did not get them.
Yep. I agree with that. Except I do think that as far as the priest goes, the fact that it didn't speed up is not necessarily a problem if other people also didn't speed up. So you look at something like Paladin, they didn't speed up. They're mostly in the meta. Mage did not speed up. Mage got more control heavy, if anything. The only very few classes actually sped up. Right? You talk about the rogue, but that's kind of it. You could argue Shaman sped up. They got a 1-drop, but it's not a terribly great 1-drop. And Warlock got a 2-drop that's effectively a 3-drop. That's more for consistency than anything. They're trying to go fast anyway. Warrior got a 3-drop, which is a very nice like curve kind of card, but it's still not something that's going to make the warrior super fast. So I know you're focused on the rogue, but when you look at all the other classes, I think priest is right in line with not being able to really speed up. So I think it's fine. I don't think priest is getting worse in this expansion. Like you said, the whole meta is moving a little bit slower. And so I do think that still helps the priest, and they have just as many ways to get. There's a little dilution going on, but other than that, they have just as many ways of getting on the board. And I think Entomb is actually going to be a good tool. It's 6 mana. It says choose an enemy minion, shuffle it into your deck. The most important thing is that for 6 mana, it gets to fully remove something off the board with 4 attack, which could be a real downfall of priest otherwise, like with the not Sun Fury Protector, with a Sunwalker or something like that. Just anything with four attack, and now you have a way to deal with it, and it's otherwise not an awful card either. You can just it's a hard removal.
Right. I think the main problem is just I'm looking for things that I think you're correct. I don't think any class gained any additional tools that they didn't have before. It's mostly sort of like, did anything get in their way, or did something like kind of put them down, like help them along the path that they want to go down? And the priest, it wants to go down this path, but right now it just has this problem where it can't establish itself in the early game. And by introducing more late game cards, especially late game removal cards, that's really not something that the priest needs. But I agree. I don't think the meta is going to shift in a big way. I don't think that other classes like jumped ahead by a significant margin.
Yeah, like what I think is happening is that the top 4 classes are all going to pull away from the next tier of classes, because the best cards, like putting Warrior aside, we'll get to Warrior, putting Warrior aside, Druid got a great 3-drop. This is like, modeled off of Harvest Golem. It's a mounted raptor, 3 mana, 3/2, death rattle, summon a random 1-cost minion. It's modeled off of Harvest Golem, which is a great arena card. And so that's fine. It has a Raven Idol also, which is a cycling card if nothing else, but still decent. And then you get to other good classes like the Mage, which just got some ridiculous cards. Like if you're ever wondering if Blizzard is concerned with keeping Mage not at the top, they're not. They're totally fine with Mage returning to the top, which I think they may do after this expansion. Rogue aside, right? So they'll be number 2 when Paladin maybe goes down. Forgotten Torch and Ethereal Conjurer, I'm not going to go into it, but they're incredibly good cards, and they're both common. Paladin has Keeper of Oldemon, you've already talked about that. That's going to be a great card. And Rogue has Pit Snake, which is going to be a good card, and Unearthed Raptor, which is the 3/4 for 3, which is also going to be a good card. That's rare, but these are all very powerful cards. Then you look at Warlock. Not really much there. Shaman, not really much there. Priest, as we've said, not a terribly large amount of things there. Hunter, absolutely nothing there. So this is not going in a good direction as far as balance goes between the bad hero power classes and the good hero power classes. That gulf is going to go wider. And it was already widened by TGT because TGT was focused on hero powers, and now it's going to get even wider because they're just not getting as good cards. I don't know how much of a problem it's going to be. It's kind of hard to judge right now what the difference is. Something like Hunter, for example, will just do really well when everything's slow, right?
Yeah.
Like, because it's... The problem with Hunter is that people are going to prevent it from setting up, and then it doesn't get set up. It never deals the one turn of huge damage, and then it loses. Well, if people are slow to set up because they're playing a longer game, as the Hunter, you're going to get in that damage, and it's going to be very good for you. Same with the Warlock to a certain extent. So who knows what the actual effects are. But in terms of card quality, there's a definite disparity there. Which brings us to the Warrior.
Ooh.
I think hands down the winner of LOE. You don't have to know too much about the situation to kind of see that these are very much overpowered cards.
I'll hold back on, because overpowered is a word that I think is a little bit loaded, but they are very good cards. And I think you should be quite excited about them. So we have Fierce Monkey, which is a 3 mana, 3/4 taunt, and it's a beast for all those crazy...
Hey, one more neutral card got added that gives everybody a potential beast synergy.
That's true. We also have Tomb Spider, which can give you another beast, and beasts synergize with other beasts, so that is definitely true. And also, we have Obsidian Destroyer, which is just War Golem power creep, I guess. 7 mana, 7/7.
Not even a little power creep. You don't just give a 7/7 and give it an extra 1/1. You make it keep regenerating 1/1s and give it taunt.
Yep.
Like the 1/1s.
Exactly. So 7 mana, 7/7, and at the end of your turn, summon a 1/1 Scarab with taunt. These are two really good cards, and it definitely shows that Blizzard is trying, and these are going in the right direction. We have a early/mid game card in Fierce Monkey. The taunt is really good. And we have a late game card in the Obsidian, and that is an instant threat, right? You need to remove it, otherwise it starts generating immense value, and it creates 1/1 pings, which is something that Warrior lacks as well.
Yeah.
And it also taunts to protect the 7/7. Good cards, definitely a right direction from Blizzard.
Yep, totally agree. And you can hear more about it. I go into a 40-minute analysis of these two cards and the rare warrior card, which is a weapon, very interesting weapon, in a video on the YouTube. #Arena Warriors Matter, League of Arena Warriors. So go look that up if you want more discussion on that. But let's move on from this, because we could talk about the Warrior all day. There's just so much going on with the Warrior when it comes to the arena and how balancing discussions go with it. But we're happy with Blizzard's direction there. They promised us good cards on common Warrior class cards. They delivered 2. There's definitely only positive feelings there. And we hope that this continues, right? It's not like a one-off deal, and that it becomes more like every time we're thinking of balancing and we're thinking of making new cards or changing cards and it's affecting the arena, we're thinking about it. We won't make problems worse. Warsong Commander won't happen in that way again. But we'll see. This is definitely a very good step in the right direction.
Yeah.
So let's move on to question from the GOAT. So just to give you guys an overview, this is a kind of a long episode. We're going to do question of the GOAT, and then we're going to talk about our tier list changes that we have made. Just Blizzard with this expansion, we had this episode all planned out to kind of touch on the expansion and then talk about our tier list changes. But now we're going to talk about everything. So we're going to talk about our tier list changes briefly, and if you want to know more about that, there's a Reddit post on those tier list changes, and it's also linked in the tier list itself on the very last tab. So that has a full write-up with all the discussion on why we made changes that we did. And then we're going to go, and this is the exciting part, we're going to go card by card down wing 1 and tell you how good these cards are.
I'm very stoked for this. Anyways, first question from the GOAT. All right, ADWCTA, I'll throw this question to you first because I know my answer, and there is a right answer for this one, so you better get it right.
That's intimidating.
So, in this new expansion, predict which card will have the best battle cry.
The best battle cry, when it comes out onto the board, what it says.
Predict which card will have the best battle cry.
Okay. they're usually the weirder cards that have the battle cry. They're like the
Totally
ones
agree.
that are a little kappa. And the card that's most kind of like winky naughty here from Blizzard that I can see, I'm going to go with the wobbling runts.
That's totally the wrong answer. Wow.
There's three of them, so they may say three things, and then they can also say things when they die.
That's a terrible. Okay. I hope you wow, you really didn't do your homework on this because there can only be one answer. It has to be Sir Finley Murgleton. For obvious reasons. Number one, he's a Murloc. Number two, he is
You know he's just gonna say Murgle Murgle.
no, but it could be in a very adventurous English accent. Look at him. He has a monocle. He has an explorer's hat. He looks very
Like a fish.
that's because he is a fish. Thank you very much. But I'm calling it right now. That
Okay.
is, if I were to be right about anything in my life, it would be this thing.
Okay, that's fair enough. Because I thought about like I didn't even think about that card. I thought of Murloc Tiny Fin, and then I was like, no, it's just gonna be Murgle Murgle like all the other Murlocs.
But Murgle with an English accent and
Okay.
kind of a legendary entrance, that's going to be it.
Okay, all right, we'll see. We'll see. By the way, another card very good for the warrior. You get to replace your hero power on turn one, and then you're like any other class.
There you go.
Okay, so we are 2 months into our patron campaign now, and the Feed the Goat campaign, and that's just been really good. When it we've been having a lot of success. I can't talk. We've been having a lot of success with it. Thank you to everybody who's donated. We're at over $1,000 right now, and it's going into a new computer for Merps, and that's going to be very, very handy because in the middle of recording this podcast, his computer even crashed. Just to reinforce the point that he definitely needs a new computer. So thank you to everybody. I had the list of names that we were supposed to give the shout outs to, but then with like the crashing computers and all of that, I think I've lost it. So we're gonna give the explicit shout outs next time. But it's patreon.com/grinninggoat if you would like to contribute and help us out. Anything would be helpful. We don't have any sponsors right now, really, so all of this is running on our wonderful Patreons. So let's move on from that into, I guess, tier list talk is the next topic.
Sounds pretty good. Yeah. So we just released a tier list update. We figured we might.
Also, I forgot to do this. I need to do the shout out. Sorry. I need to do the shout out for because we made a video on YouTube about the goat and the progress that has more information on that and just more thank yous to everyone who's contributed. So if you go on our YouTube, you can go and watch that video. Okay. Now we can talk about real Hearthstone stuff.
Fantastic. All right, so we released the tier list update just in time so you guys can enjoy the true rankings 3 to 4 days before everything gets messed up by the expansion.
But it's going to be very slowly messed up by the expansion. Like a week at a time.
That is very true. And we moved quite a lot of cards. So for this one, we looked at stats, just like for any major update, and we combined stats with our own experience, and we tried to look for themes. And we found a couple of big themes that I'll touch upon here. But as ADWCTA stated, if you want to see the entire write-up, you can go on Reddit and see the entire thing. But one thing that I want to emphasize is that subpar cards that deal 1 damage are not bad. So
yeah.
Ironforge Rifleman, Nomergon Infantry, Moonfire, these are not as bad as you would think. Now, you still shouldn't pick them over good cards, but we are in the business of accuracy here, so we want to make sure that the score is reflective of their power, and they are performing better. So, ADWCTA, why do you think this is happening?
Well, it's because there are less spells, right? As spells get diluted, there's less ability for you to do things with initiative. So any amount of initiative you can get your hands on is really insanely important. So that 1 extra damage from the raid leader at the cost of like 1.5 mana, I'm not going to say it's worth it, but it's kind of worth it at a certain point in
Yeah.
many situations. Like, you know you're not getting a good deal, but that's just what you need right now. So you're preventing yourself from getting screwed over. And that prevention itself is worth the extra mana and a half. And it's things like that, you know, the cards themselves aren't terribly good, but like Ironforge Rifleman, even better than a raid leader, because you can swing that 1 damage wherever. You don't have to hit into it with another minion. You don't even need another minion on the board. So those are all very, like, the card that really gets to me is Savagery. We raised that card by like 10 points. We had it pretty low. It's a pretty bad card.
It is not very good.
But if you guys don't know, and I don't blame you for not knowing what this card is, it's a druid card. It's 1 mana. It's a spell. It's, I think, rare. I don't even think it's common. And it reads, deal the attack of your hero to another minion. So
You can't even go face with it.
you can't go face with it. You hero power. You have to hero power first, or like use a claw or something, and then you use this card. It's god awful. And it's not even like Moonfire is 0 mana 1 damage. That's pretty good. It's like infinite tempo. But this is 1 mana 1 damage. And you have to use 2 mana beforehand to bring your claw out. But it's not the worst card in the world.
It isn't.
As
It
it
gets the
turns
job
out.
done. And it goes with the theme of these small points of damage are rarer. And anything you can do to get initiative and change the math on the board is pretty good right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And also, this is something that people are interested in, even though it's not the biggest change ever. Chillwind Yeti goes down once
God.
again.
It's the end of an era.
Well, it has been the end of it. It just, as I wrote on Reddit, it's just gut punch after gut punch for the Yeti. It was only a few months ago where it stood at like 74, and now it is at 68.
You think
So-
Shredder's bad for it? Everything. Like, Dark Iron's way better than it. Silverhand Knight's way better than it. Stormwind Champion. Like, these cards aren't even, like, new cards. They're
Yep.
cards that have always been around and that used to perform at around the level of Chillwind Yeti. But now, those cards, because they're kind of special and they do something else, are really starting to find ways to shine, whereas the neutral Yeti is just finding more and more ways to get destroyed because there are more swings built into the game as you expand the game, which always happens.
Yeah, definitely. And with the Yeti, the lack of text is becoming more and more apparent. It's just hurting it more. Right now, we're in an arena meta where the path to winning oftentimes involves either
The path to victory.
combos, synergies, or kind of just not vanilla cards anymore. We're not in Classic where you can just ride to victory by drafting Yetis and Boulderfist Ogres, right? Now people with their Cavalier Raiders and Murloc Knights are going to beat those vanilla decks. So while Yeti is still good, the meta has shifted away from just pretty good stats on a vanilla body. And now it is more so of that, like, can you get the synergy and can you just like outvalue your opponents or out-tempo them by using these tricky ways that were not available before.
Yep. I completely agree. And what's another big change? I'm trying to think of another really major change that we made. We also rebalanced all the legendaries based on stats, including the TGT ones, which we kind of just went like, oh, stats say this. That makes sense because, we haven't played with all those legendaries. But the one that really stands out, and I would consider it the only good legendary in TGT for the arena, is or the only one that we undervalue. Let's put it that way. There are other good ones, obviously, but it's Edric,
Adric the Pure.
Adric the Pure, right? He is he's basically a super outdoor peacekeeper, and outdoor peacekeepers are really good, and I don't know why we thought he would not be that insanely good. He does have a huge stat penalty to go with it.
He does. Definitely does.
But it doesn't matter. Apparently, you Adric the Pure your opponent's board, and you just win. So
Yeah.
that's gotten moved up to like 100, I think.
So I think that was really good. Now Paladins have 2 class legendaries that are 100 or above.
It's something they needed.
Yeah, definitely. It was poor Paladins. They needed help. on epics because Cog Hammer is not powerful enough. They needed help with rares because Outdoor and Muster just isn't powerful enough. And thank heaven they have two legendaries, 100 or over now.
Yeah. So let's, before we move on off of this tier list thing, if you want more information, again, there's a Reddit post. It's also linked on the actual tier list itself on the last tab. It is more than 50 cards moved. Most of them only move by half a tier or less, but there are some changes, and most of the ones that move significantly were like really crappy cards to begin with. So you're really not going to notice it. This is the 50 card moved, and I don't notice a thing patch to our tier list, because we moved a ton of stuff around, but the chances of this affecting your arena experience in a hugely significant way is probably limited to like a very small handful of changes.
Yep.
Like one thing we did is we bumped like Sap and Freezing Trap even higher than we had before. We're just like all in on those cards. They're just so good in causing these tempo swings right now.
Yeah, but all right, so are we about to get into the first swing? This is what I've been excited about. This is what I want to talk about.
Okay. Card by card discussion now. So we thought about doing all the cards at once, like, a lot of the other streamers are doing, but you don't get enough time to really talk about the cards. And it doesn't really matter to talk about all the cards at once because you don't get these cards until later anyway. So we're going to, for every Lightforge from here on out, during the release period of the League of Explorers, we are going to do one wing, which is the next wing, the wing that's coming out the week after that. And we're going to talk a little about just kind of where these cards are valued and why.
Yep.
So why don't you start us off? This first wing is going to have a Genie of Zephyrs, which is a 5-mana 4/6 epic neutral card, and it says whenever you cast a spell on another friendly minion, cast a copy of it on this one.
Yeah. So we see this effect. So 5 mana for a 4/6 used to be better. It's still okay. You're getting kind of a Spiteful Smith body, and so the body itself is pretty decent. The effect is unique. We see it with another epic card, sort of, with Echoing Ooze. The only difference is that Echoing Ooze, you copy it, but you can't have initiative that turn. So you Echoing Ooze, let's say you're Paladin, you Echoing Ooze and you Blessing of Kings, great value, also great tempo. Now you create 2 5/6s in one turn on turn 6, so that's fantastic. But you have no initiative. With this one, if you've already dropped the Ginny, I'm trying, hopefully I'm saying it correctly, you can, on the next turn, you can drop something, buff that, and it'll in essence buff this as well, which doubles, and it gives you initiative. So with this one, after you drop it, a lot of your opponents will be thinking, especially if you're a priest, especially if you're a paladin, sometimes a druid as well, they'll be thinking, man, like, do I have to remove this? Is this a must remove? And it puts unique pressure in that way.
Yeah, I agree.
That's about it.
I have a lot to add to this discussion.
You really do. So as for where we think this card is, first of all, it's an epic card, so you're not going to see it too often in the arena. You should definitely value it a little bit more highly with classes that have good buffs. Power Word Shield, Vagrant's Chosen, for priests, for paladins, Blessing of Kings, Seal of Champions, really good. And just know that if you put it out there as one of these classes, this is going to have pretty high priority because people know that you can always just put something else down and double dip on one of these buffs and get extreme value that way.
See, this may be a theme here, but I'm just very not excited about this card because are people really going to play around it?
No,
I wouldn't.
No. Nope.
I wouldn't. Like, I wouldn't play around it myself. I wouldn't expect it to be played around. As far as I'm concerned, and also, like, keep in mind, this only works if you cast it on another minion, so you have an ordering problem too. So only one of your minions is going to get the initiative from the buff, unless you have 2 minions on the board with initiative already coming into your turn, in which case you win the game anyway, and who cares what his ability is. Like, normally you have 1 minion, and then you drop the Genie of Zephyrs, and then you buff the minion that's on the board with the initiative, right? And then that minion with the initiative can attack, and your Genie of Zephyrs is bigger than it should be. Or you have the Genie of Zephyrs already on the board, and then you drop a small minion, and you buff that minion, and you get the buff on your Genie of Zephyrs. In either case, first of all, not both of them can have initiative in most situations. And second of all, it's like a 3-card combo kind of thing that you have to set up.
Yeah, definitely.
I really think it's just going to be a 5-mana 4/6.
Yeah, I think a lot of times it'll just be a 5-mana 4/6, and especially in the arena where it's tough. Like once you have board initiative, you're already in the lead by far,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
that's definitely, this is just something that can lock down the game. And number one's an epic card. Number two, the situation I'm speaking of is kind of rare as well. So by no means do I want people thinking that I think this is a premium card. These are kind of situations where you do get the value out of it. But you're absolutely correct. It's not, most of the time, while the upside is good, and you can think of lots of situations where it's really cool, you're not going to fulfill those situations. Or if you do fulfill them, you can just ask yourself the question, did it really help me that much? Like, would I have lost without it? And a lot of times you'll see that it's just win more.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, let's go to the rare cards that are going to be released in this wing. Ancient Shade. This is interesting. It is a 4-mana 7/4, and it is a rare card, neutral card, and it says shuffle, and the battle cry is shuffle an Ancient Curse into your deck that deals 7 damage to you when drawn.
Not bad. I mean, it's not great, but I think this is a card that people have different opinions on. And just to let you guys know, so I don't know what other kind of prominent members in the community have said about these cards. So all of these opinions are just straight from my own mind. So one thing you want to look at is Lost Tall Strider, which sees play in the arena. So this adds 2 attack to Lost Tall Strider, with the downside that you're going to draw this card, and at some point you have a chance of taking 7 damage. And I think we've established that the chance of you drawing to that card, throwing a very loose number out there, is like 50%, right? It's like 50% for one game for you to draw this. So on average, you can expect to take like 3-4 damage if you want to spread it out. And so the question is, you definitely gain stats. How much does it matter? And so when we talked about this before, I think you brought up a good point that there are quite a few situations in which the 7 attack matters, right?
Yeah. A 7 attack matters. Well, maybe not the 7th attack point, but the 6 attack point matters because there's a lot of 2/6s out there to begin with. And then when you're hitting up, so 4-mana 2/6s are now a thing, which means that the extra attack matters. And on top of that, this is your turn 4, so you may be going to your opponent's turn 5, and turn 5s, a lot of things have 6 health, right? Your Pit Fighter is just to start. Your 4/6s, as we talked about before, maybe even like a Hungry Dragon or something. There are a lot of stuff with 6 health.
Yeah, I agree. I think before TGT, the extra 2 damage doesn't matter as much. And now I think it's, I don't think it's too far away from a Lost Tall Strider, where between the difference in the times in which the 7 HP hit really hurts you versus the times where the 7 attack matters. Obviously, based on your play style, you just sometimes really don't want to take that 7 damage. Sometimes that 7 attack can really help you out and save you. But I don't think it's too far away on either side.
Yeah. Like, I think it's a very well-balanced card, is basically what we're saying. Like, they took a bird, the Lost Tall Strider, and they're like, let's give it a lot of attack, but let's give it a really big downside. And it kind of evens out. I probably like it more than Merps does, but overall, it's not like... It looks like you're gaining 2 extra more stats than you should, and then it should be an insanely good card. But the distribution is still pretty bad. So it's not going to be a great card, but
Also,
it's going to be significantly more than a bird, I think.
I haven't seen the Ancient Curse that you've drawn. I'm assuming it is like all other kind of downside cards in which you draw an additional card after you draw that one. Now, the equation changes if you don't draw an additional card after you draw that one. That would be terrible. But I don't think they've made any downside card which just takes away your draw as well to this
Yeah,
point.
yeah, no, that would be insane.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what's happening here.
Yeah.
The next card is Summoning Stone, another rare neutral, and this is a wonderful card. It clearly is a very serious card that is not here just for fun, and everyone will use it in their decks. It is 5 mana, a 0/6, and it reads, whenever you cast a spell, summon a random minion of the same cost.
Yeah. I don't know how much we want to talk about this. I think I spent so much time with my others that I should limit myself here. So I don't think it's a very good card. ADWCTA, you?
I think it's a great card. I think
Okay.
that, like, what you have to do is you have to think about a way to recover your 5 mana, right? Because you could, first of all, okay, fine, it's not a great card, but it's an okay-ish card. It's a subpar okay-ish card. Okay, it's a bad card, but you can make it work. It's not an unplayable card. So you're not going to be able to play this, or you shouldn't play it, until you have something else, a spell, to play. And then you need to play it like, it's probably a turn 10, turn 9 kind of thing, where you play the Summoning Stone, then you play your 4 mana spell or your 10 mana spell when you want to play that spell, whenever that opportunity comes along, and you get that mana back in terms of the minion, right? So
Yep.
let's say you play a 4 mana spell. What happens is, instead of this 5 mana being a 0/6 that does nothing, it's now a 4 mana whatever minion you get plus a 1 mana 0/6 that your opponent really wants to remove in case you have any more spells for the later turns, which, you may not, but generally you could probably muster up 2 spells. And so it's not going to snowball out of control, but you can get the value out of it in the late game. And you can't say that about a lot of really bad cards like a Core Hound or something, right? Like,
Sure.
those are just minions that you can only play in the late game and you're not going to get any value out of it. This, you probably can. You can probably recover its value. It's just kind of situational in your ability to do it.
So with this card, any card in which you would draft a Gadget Stand Auctioneer in the later picks, you would draft this card, right?
Yes,
It's
exactly.
basically a Gadget Stand Auctioneer without the ability
But
to
better.
do anything. Oh man, really? We'll see. We'll see.
Well,
But
because instead of drawing a card, you basically play the card. Right?
sure.
That's got to be worth more than a 4/4 body.
I think there's definitely some discussion there.
Okay.
But that could
Okay,
be
we'll
for
talk
another
about
time.
it. We'll talk about it. All right. So now let's get to, those were the cards that, Ancient Shade maybe we'll see some play, but now we're going to get into the common neutrals. You're going to see these cards actually in the meta. Let's start with the Discover mechanic. Jeweled Scarab. It's a 2 mana 1/1 beast. And the battle cry is Discover a 3-cost card, which again, to remind you what Discover means, it means you get 3 random cards shown to you that would be all 3-cost cards that's available to your class, meaning the neutrals and the class cards. They can be spells, they can be weapons, they can be any kind of cards. And then you get to pick one of them, and that card comes into your hand, and the other 2 cards disappear.
Yeah. So I think with this card, it's people will immediately make an analogy to Novice Engineer, right? Another 2 mana 1/1 that draws a card. And Novice Engineer is an average to below average card in the arena. You see it, people pick it. You're never happy to pick it. Now this is a little bit unique. So number one, it has some beast synergy, works a little bit better in some classes, but it immediately helps you curve out into your next turn. And it's good on turn 2 because you immediately have something to play next turn. But
I have to disagree that it's good on turn 2.
well, you're never happy to just play a 1/1. You're never happy to just be a paladin and just hero power on turn 2.
Right.
It is something that you can play, and if you had a turn 3 play already, you get another one, you get some options. If you didn't, then, well, that's your play for next turn. Now, one of the problems from this card, and it's something that you talk about a lot, is that you don't always play on turn 2, right? So you have issues
You
there.
never play this card on turn 2 because you're going to mulligan this thing away. You don't want this. If you're relying on this for the turn 2, you're done. You're not winning the game unless you have a very controlled deck with a lot of like board clears and things like that. So this card will so rarely be played on turn 2. What's mostly going to happen is this card is going to get played much later, the way you would play a Novice Engineer. And so what you're doing is you're taking in a roughly the same value, like you're getting an arena pick basically.
Yeah.
Except that arena pick has to be 3 mana. And by the time you're playing this card, you're looking for something a little heavier than 3 mana. Like you're looking for something. Your average deck the average deck, the average card mana cost on the average deck is like 3.5.
Yeah.
And so that's even better than this. Much less the fact that you're going to mulligan for your small cards, so you're going to already have most of your small cards in your hand compared to your big cards. So a draw into your deck is actually more useful in terms of just the raw amount of power it provides. Now, a draw into your deck is totally random, whereas this, you do get to pick out of like probably some subpar choices, but you do get a choice. So there's a little bit balancing there, but overall, I would rather have a novice engineer unless this is turn 2 and I don't have a turn 3.
Yeah, and that's something that I think people would be a little bit surprised at. And when, because some people might initially see it as, oh, it's just a better novice engineer, as a tribal synergy. It has, you curve out better on turn 2. Something that people really need to think about is it's very rare to play a certain card on the turn it is supposed to be played, mostly because you either don't draw into it in time, or you don't draw into it in time, or you have another option, right? If you draw another 2, what are you going to play? This or the 2-drop? You're going to play the actual 2-drop. So that's consideration. And I think in the late game stages, the fact that you're drawing a subpar card overall, because the average deck is 3.5 mana rather than 3 mana. So you're getting this, and in the late game, presumably you have the mana to spend. So you're getting this decrease in value. Is it like significantly different from a novice engineer in value? Like, I don't think so, but I'm not sure about your opinion here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's significantly worse.
No.
We're just like, we're splitting hairs here. But it is just the way you think about cards, right? Like, this is how
Exactly.
people do game design. This is how you do deck building. This is how you eke out the little extra amounts of value into your deck. But the one that you're probably more likely to see in the arena, and the one that you probably care about more, is for the next wing at least, is the other neutral common card that is coming. It is 5 mana, a 4/4, but it has a death rattle that says give a random friendly minion +3/+3. So when this thing dies, if you have any minion on the board, it gets +3/+3, and that's huge. The card's name is, I'm going to butcher it, Anubisath Sentinel.
Good job. I mean, I'm pretty sure you still got that wrong, but great job there.
Let's just call it the Sentinel.
The Sentinel, sure. So I've been tackling these cards first. Why don't you go first for this one?
All right. I hate this card. I think it's like
man.
an awful card, and we've talked about this card before. I know you like it more than I do, but
I do.
I see no value in this card because of the situations in which you can play it. You are anti-tempoing yourself when you play this card, right? It's only a 4/4, and you get the tempo back later. But unlike other cards that have this kind of death rattle effect, think something like a Void Caller, where you give up the exact amount. Void Caller gives up +1/+1. This gives up +1/+2. So it gives up even more for the death rattle effect. This death rattle effect is not guaranteed, and neither is Void Caller, but this death rattle effect is not guaranteed because of what your opponent can do. So you are letting your opponent dictate the entire board and how much value you're getting out of this card. That's the only reason why Avenge is not the best card in the whole entire freaking world, is because your opponent gets to decide. This is the same thing as an Avenge, meaning your opponent gets that. They don't have to kill your minion. They don't have to give you a minion this minion can kill them itself off of. All their stuff can only have 3 attack. And if they have any kind of board at all, they can remove your other minion and then remove this minion. And this minion is 5 mana and only has 4 health. A lot of removals remove it. A lot of answers are possible. And if you're fighting for the board and you're ahead, this could work. Like, I'd give a 50% chance of working. But if you're fighting for the board and you're behind, it's a dead card in your hand. And that's a huge risk to take with a card in your hand that you can't play until turn 5 earliest anyway, even in the best of situations. Like, it's just far too situational, and you have far too little control. And if you're a good player, you don't want that kind of basically RNG.
Yeah, definitely. So when ADWCTA says like he doesn't like the card and I like the card, I don't want you guys thinking that I will or I think it should be rated very highly. Let's just take a look at the stats. So for 5 mana, what is the standard bearer right now? The standard bearer is Pit Fighter, right? So Pit Fighter, you have a 5/6. For this, you have a 4/4 with a chance of getting 7/7 worth of stats. So you're basically gambling with kind of, between the 5/6, you're gambling plus or minus three stats either way. You don't want to take that gamble. You just don't want to take that gamble. You rather want the consistency and the guarantee of the Pit Fighter rather than this. So I think it's much worse than a Pit Fighter. The only difference is from, in my opinion, from ADWCTA is how often we think we can create an awkward board state for our opponent. And I think it's a little bit more often than ADWCTA thinks it is. And that's the only difference there. Like, I think we're both in agreement that this is not like a top card at all. So
like my biggest concern isn't even that like your opponent can remove it. Even if your opponent can't remove it, you may not be able to get the value the next turn, right? Like you may not be able to kill it off, or you may not want to kill it off. And then you don't get that +3/+3 until 2 turns later. And that's just it. That's how the card was valued. And it's valued that way for a very good reason. It could really get stuck on a low value situation.
Yep.
Or, there are also weird cases where like you play a Venture Co. and then, we kill this guy and then it buffs your Venture Co. and we really want your Venture Co. to stay alive because we're going to then outdoor it or like, whatever, right? Things like that. You can kill it and then kill the other minion. Like if you also can't drop this with anything big. Like if you already have a Boulder Fist Ogre on the board and you drop this, it's kind of wasted because they're really only killing the Boulder Fist with something big anyway.
Yep.
That's definitely. Just a lot of things can go wrong here.
It could. That's Hearthstone for you.
All right. So now we'll move on to the 4 class cards. We're not going to talk about the legendary. The legendary you're going to get is Reno Jackson. We're not going to talk about it because 1, it's a legendary, you're never going to see it, and 2, it's Reno Jackson. It sucks. Let's just leave it at that. If you think this card is at all not awful,
all right,
okay. So let's go with some classes. Let's start with the best class. The best class in the arena, the Warrior. Obsidian Destroyer. I know you already talked about what the Obsidian Destroyer is going to do, so I'm going to start on this one.
Sure.
It's a 7 mana 7/7, and its ability is summon a 1/1 Scarab with Taunt at the end of your turn. That means at the end of every turn, you get a 1/1 Taunt. This totally messes with your opponent's battle plans because they need to somehow remove 7 health from the board, and they lose 1 attack, or they lose 2 mana. If your opponent pings the 1/1 Scarab on the board, what this means is you have gotten a 5 mana 7/7. Insane value, and your opponent has to remove it, so it effectively has Taunt at least over your face.
Yep.
Just insane value. Otherwise, your opponent has to dedicate an attack to kill off your 1/1 before it can get to your Obsidian Destroyer. So more often than not, unless you're so far behind on the board, if you're even fighting for the board, this thing's going to live for 1 turn, or it's going to eat your opponent's prime large removal and still leave a 1/1 body. So very, very much worth it. And a good number of times, it's just going to snowball out of control because your opponent can't deal with it. You know how annoying it is when the shaman keeps rolling that freaking taunt totem?
Very, very annoying.
Guaranteed taunt totem every turn.
Yeah.
And you don't have to spend 2 mana. Ridiculous amounts of value. I think that without a doubt that this is the best card being released this wing. So if you're...
Okay.
And I would normally say because it's the best card, you should go try the Warrior, but Warrior is really going to get even better as the wings go on, so maybe you want to hold off a bit anyway. But it's definitely a cool card to try out.
Right. So I'll jump on and say that I definitely think it's a good card. The problem is, when we talked about Priest as well, it just doesn't address sort of some of the issues. Like the Warrior, it has trouble interacting with the board, holding the board, and weapons are good and they have value, but you only have 1 weapon slot. So this is good in terms of it gives it a good value late game creature. But
yeah, Warriors didn't have that before.
True, but the key term there is late game, right? So by giving it a late game option, it implies you have to get to late game while not being extremely behind. So I'm looking forward to more Warrior cards in which they can grab the board early and take advantage of that, and not so much like you have to play catch up. And this is, this can help you play catch up, but it's probably not going to win it for you if you're losing already.
Yeah, but I mean, the monkey's coming, so you're gonna get that early game tempo advantage.
Yeah,
And that's Wing 2, and that'll be exciting. But you don't have to use this card as a kind of control card, right? Like, it's not a removal. I wouldn't classify it as control. It's actually better when you already have a board, because then there's more things your opponent wants to remove, and they can't. So I think it fits into the Warriors' game plan. You're going to make it to turn 7. You are going to be able to drop this. It's not quite a Dr. Boom, but it'll have that kind of impact that'll demand immediate attention. Your opponent will be scrambling, and that's when you can deal lethal. Like, I do think that this is not one of those cards where, like a Fearsome Doomguard, where you're just like putting it out and removing your opponent's stuff with it. Like, you're going face, and that's okay. It'll generate the 1/1 taunt. You can go face.
There you go.
Okay, next card. Warlock. Dark Peddler. It's a 2-mana, 2/2, and it has a battle cry. Discover a 1-cost card.
So this is a card I kind of, because we've had this discussion before, I kind of talked you into it a little bit. I know you were initially pretty low on this card, and I had to convince you that it's not the worst card. It's not going to be a premium card, but
it's actually a pretty good card. You've convinced me all the way up to this is a pretty damn good card from, oh god, this is unplayable.
No, so 2 mana for a 2/2, it's definitely not what you want. It still goes into the Warlock's preference of dropping a lot of small stuff and then hero powering. Now, discover a 1-cost card, that is key, because it's not just a 1-cost minion, it's a 1-cost card. And for Warlocks, that includes premium cards such as Mortal Coil, Soulfire, you can grab that. You can grab Corruption, which is a spell everyone wants to get. Power Overwhelming. That's just so good. Power Overwhelming.
On the Dark Peddler.
Power Overwhelming and Mortal Coil are the premiums that you really want to get. And sometimes you pick up a Flame Imp or just a 1-drop that really fits into the Warlock's game plan. So it's another way for you to draw a card, but you don't have to commit totally to that 2 mana and drop nothing on the board, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a hedge there. And I like that. These like small hedges here and there that allow Warlocks to get the cards, but at the same time, not totally commit to the hero power.
Yeah, and you get to pick the card. Here's where Discover actually matters, because there are spells and there are minions, right? Like, you may take, if this is your turn 3 and you're playing a Dark Peddler, or if you have 2/2 drops and you play a Dark Peddler because your opponent has a 3/2 and is just going to trade with this anyway, and you don't want to give up your 2/3 or your other 3/2, you may very, very well pick a worse minion compared to a premium spell just to have something to play that turn. So here's where this Discover is not just like take a random good card. It's like you will actually use this card more often than not to take exactly what you need, because you get presented with 3 options, which means your chances of having the selection of 1/1, 1 Warlock spell, and then 1 like random other 1-drop is extremely high. Like 70% of the time. We did some math on it, I forget what the number was, but it's really high. So this card actually, like, this is the way this Discover mechanic should work. That, like, Drolled Scarab thing is, like, whatever. I don't know what you're really going to do with a 3-cost card. Like, yeah, sure, you're going to get a spell at the end, maybe, but 3-cost spells could also be crap, like, who knows. But this Dark Peddler, you can do things with the Dark Peddler. It's just, its flexibility is unmatched when it comes to the Warlock. Because Warlock is not very good at flexibility. It's one of its biggest weaknesses. You just put stuff on the board and then you buff them.
Yeah, that's definitely a problem with Warlock, where you want to, from turns 1 through, I would say, at least 5, not use your hero power at all and just tempo out stuff, and you basically have very few cards in your hand by turn 6, 7, 8, and that's when you start hero powering, and you capitalize on your early advantage, draw cards, keep on pushing, and that's how you win. And it's powerful, but it could be very unforgiving if you're forced to hero power in the early turns.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, 2 more cards left in this wing. So if you guys notice, there's a lot of cards in this wing, and there's a lot of cards that's going to be in every wing, because there's only 4 wings, and there are 45 cards. So we're getting almost double the amount of cards per wing that we normally get. Shaman, Rumbling Elemental.
Okay. How about you take this one first?
Okay. 4 mana, 2/6, which is something we're seeing a lot of recently with what Blizzard's giving us. And the ability is, after you play a Battlecry minion, deal 2 damage to a random enemy. So this is like a ship's cannon, which we all love, except it's coming out on turn 4, and it's much more easily triggered.
Yep.
because if you guys have ever played with crowd favorite, it's not that hard to get a battle cry, and with a rumbling elemental, it even has 6 health, so it's pretty much going to live a turn for the most part, and then you can get your battle cry follow up to make it deal 2 damage to something. Its biggest problem is that dealing 2 damage to a random enemy is not all that great of an ability. Uh, it can include your opponent's face. It can include minions you don't want to deal the damage to. The randomness really hurts here, and there's no way to control it. So I don't think it's all that good of a card. I don't like the randomness when it comes to dealing damage randomly on the board or to your opponent's face. And the fact that it needs a combo to trigger, even though it's a very common combo, is not worth its bad stat distribution, and frankly that it's missing a stat point.
Yeah, and especially if you look at one of the common battle cries for Shaman, it's Fire Elemental, right? For Fire Elemental, and then you point the damage there, and a lot of times you create this awkward math situation where if you have a Stormpike Commando, or you have like an Elven Archer or a Fire Elemental, like these battle cries that produce damage, then you can create these situations where, like, well, what are my probabilities here? If I click on this, what's my chances of that actually hitting the thing I wanted to hit? So it creates these situations where sometimes you're forced to make perhaps like awkward plays to try to take advantage of the battle cry.
Yeah, yeah, and so it's just generally not worth it. Like, is it better than a 2/7 turtle? Probably, maybe by a little bit, but it's not, the turtle's not all that good. We rate the turtle at 42.
Yeah,
So
this will be deck dependent as well. So.
yeah, yeah, but the fact that it's even being compared to around the level of a turtle, it's not doing this card any favors.
Yep.
And the last card, we just saved the best for last.
Oh,
It's
definitely.
a paladin card, so you know it's going to be the best card. And
Yep.
it's a paladin secret, so excitement intensifies. And it is called Sacred Trial, 1 mana, because it's a paladin
It
secret.
sounds like it would be a pretty great card.
Sacred trials, right? What kind of trials are these people going through? So the sacred trial is that when your opponent has at least 3 minions and plays another one, destroy it. Now, when I first read the card, I thought, "Holy crap! Your opponent just dies," and then I realized it meant the fourth minion, and not your opponent. So, so destroy it's just got a lot less powerful. Because I was trying to make this card actually playable, right? I was trying to think like, oh man, what would this horribly, horribly arcane condition
Oh my
trigger?
gosh.
And I thought, well, it's a win condition. So now whenever the paladin has a secret out, before you can activate it and know for sure, you will need to, like take the chance. But that's not how it works.
Oh my gosh. I'm sorry. I think I've recovered. I haven't heard anything you said after you said. Um,
Well, okay, because it is very much a vague term, all right? Grammatically, if you read that sentence, it can refer to many things. But I have come to the conclusion that it probably does mean the minion and not your opponent.
probably. It
Probably.
probably destroys the minion, right? Like,
Okay, like I
we'll
kind of
see.
I miss those Magic the Gathering cards, right? Like one of my favorite Magic the Gathering cards ever was I'm forgetting the name. It's like Brink of Death or something like that. It's a priest card, or sorry, it's a white card. No, Near Death Experience. Near Death Experience. It's an enchantment, which means it's something that stays on the board and no one can touch it. And it says like if you survive a turn with 1 health, you win the next turn.
Oh.
And so your entire game plan changes. You just want to get to 1 health and like counter everything your opponent plays. And I made a cool deck with that where you like also deal damage to yourself and use all these like sacrifice your health effects, and to just preserve that one win condition. It was always awesome when I got to pull it off. And I thought maybe Hearthstone was starting to move in that kind of direction, but not quite.
Yeah.
So
That's
so
pretty
how
cool.
good is the actual version of Sacred Trial?
Pretty bad, I would say. There's no clever way to say it. There's no joy in me when I talk about this card. It is just, I'll say this: if you draft it and you play it, you could definitely get a response like if it hits. And this is one of those cards where,
It's an emo trigger.
yeah, it's definitely an emote trigger, and it's also one of those cards that like I want to trash it, but I can tell I have probably like a 50% chance I'm just going to totally forget about this card starting on Thursday, and I'm going to drop my Boulder Fist Ogre into it. And I'll test for Noble Sacrifice, I'll test for Avenge. I'm like, okay, it's competitive spirit. Or like Eye for an Eye. And then I'll just go face, see that's not. I'm like, all right, it's competitive spirit. Boom. Ogre dead.
Yeah, it's like an eye for an eye that you can't test for.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
it's better than eye for an eye, I think.
That is that's what we're comparing it to.
Yeah, and
Sure.
I hate the fact that this card exists because you're just less sure of the avenge testing. Like one of the best uses for this card is to fake the avenge when you think your opponent won't trigger it, because your opponent will start playing around all that stuff.
Yep.
And it's pretty good for mind games because it's really hard to test, and you don't want to test it. Because putting the fourth minion out, if it is a Sacred Trial, you're going to lose a minion to a 1 mana secret. Like, why would you ever do that? So you'll just never know. Like, it's really pretty good mind games. But that's all it is. It's like just mind games. Your opponent probably won't even want to put out 4 minions. So we'll see how it works. I just know it's going to frustrate me to no end when I don't know if my opponent has an Avenge. Or a redemption or just something, and I'm just like playing around a Sacred Trial the whole time. Ultimately, when I realize it, when I'm about to lose,
Yep.
and of course I'm not playing around it, so I'll also play right into it sometimes. You at least think you're gonna forget about it. I will know its existence and still play into it. So
It's like attacking face with the 20 damage minion. You're like, it can't be Eye for an Eye.
yeah, exactly. That's what I do. But okay, so that's all the cards. That's week 1 in review. I think we gave you guys a pretty good picture of where all these cards stand. We'll have the exact ratings released to you, like sometime before the release, and it'll be updated in the tier list as we always do. So that's going to happen. But if you're wondering how the meta will change in the next week, the meta won't change on any of these weeks because none of these cards are good enough to change the freaking meta. It will kind of slowly eke out something, and that will happen probably at the end of the very last week when the 25% bonus shifts from TGT into LOE. And then we're truly in the LOE meta. But if you're trying to like figure out how the meta changes in like these times, it really won't. Like Obsidian Destroyer maybe will get a couple players to try the Warrior again, but people who are a little patient will wait 1 more week, and you're not going to see Warriors anyway. No one is so excited about Dark Peddler, they're going to start playing Warlock or Rumbling Elemental or Sacred Trial, and none of the neutral cards do anything really either. So, I wish we had some secret to tell you of how to beat the meta this next week, but there's really not. Just have fun with it.
Have fun with it. If anything, the meta might get a little bit easier because more people will be playing the game. So who knows? Just go with it. Don't change up your strategy for this week. Have fun. I think a lot of people forget to do that.
Yeah. It's have fun time. This is a fun expansion. Everyone knows it. They announced it. They were very excited about it. They didn't talk about what kind of crazy good constructed decks you can build with it. The arena impact seems to be really, really heavily centered on Warrior and like 1 or 2 other like good cards for other classes, but not on the neutral cards. And overall, it's going to be what it is. And we're just happy that there's more cards and it's coming so soon that we're gonna get to play with it.
Yep.
So we have one more topic that we thought we were going to get to, which is class talk for the Warlock, because we are playing a Warlock run after this on the Arena Coup. But there's not much to talk about. We already did Warlock in the TGT meta. We both like Warlock. I'm just going to speak for Merps here. We both like Warlock. I have a above 8 win per run average with Warlock. I don't know what Merps's is, but it's pretty insane.
Look at you. Look at how special
yeah.
you are.
Yeah, look. But it's still not a premium class. Like, you want to know what a premium class is? That's Rogue. Like, I don't know what's going to happen with Rogue when LOE comes out, but right now, me and Merps together on like probably like 20 runs in TGT are still averaging over 10 wins per run with Rogue. So, like, that tells you how freaking ridiculously powerful Rogue is. And you can tell, right? If you look on our website, we don't play Rogue any more often than any other class. In fact, Rogue is one of my least played classes. And we have, like, every other one of our 12-win runs is with Rogue. That's just how powerful it is right now. So Warlock is not there, but I do think it's probably, like, around Hunter level, and it's above, maybe, like, Shaman, maybe, like, Priest, definitely, like, Warrior. And it's not that it's bad when you play with it. If you can just get kind of a normal deck, it's very good. It's only bad because it's very inconsistent in drafting, and there's a lot of times where you just can't get a functional deck.
Yeah. But anyways, so talking about warlocks, I think it's like smack dab in the middle. If you're talking about like power and where it fits, it definitely has strengths. It definitely has weaknesses. And skill wise, I think it's in the middle as well. I don't think it's as tough to pilot as something like Rogue, but I don't think it's as easy either. Like just because you have a lot of things to consider, especially during the draft as well, because a lot of people, I know we value taunts much more highly than some other people do with warlocks, and we've seen one winning strategy, and the stats back it up. It's just draft a lot of taunts with warlock and win the value game.
Yep. Yep. Draft a lot of taunts, a lot of removals, or a lot of one drops.
Yep.
And so I think that wraps it up for us. One more thing. Yeah. No more things. We're done.
No. Okay.
No,
Excellent.
we're done. We're done.
Great talk. This has
It's
been
a
a
wonderful
very long
Lightforge.
Lightforge.
This is a hugely long Lightforge. The next one won't be so long. Actually, the next one may be long too. We're hoping to get Crip on for next week, so fingers crossed that works out. We did not. No one knew the expansion was going to come out already by then, so who knows? Maybe this will change things, but we're hoping to still get him on, and that'll be an interesting discussion, and we could talk about the expansion for that as well. So tune in next week for the Lightforge, and once again, this is ADWCTA.
This is Merps. Take care, guys.
See you guys.